Chaos erupted in a packed courtroom when a stray dog suddenly barged in, barking loudly 3 times before sitting confidently at the center. Moments later, something happened that left everyone in stunned silence. What was this mysterious dog trying to reveal? The trial was the talk of the town, a high-stakes case involving David Hollis, a wealthy businessman accused of embezzling millions from local charities. Judge Martha Campbell, known for her strict demeanor, presided with a steady hand. Reporters filled every seat, and the atmosphere was tense as the prosecution prepared to deliver its final argument. Amidst this tension, the courtroom doors creaked open. At first, no one noticed, but the soft patter of paws soon caught everyone's attention. Gasps spread through the room as a stray dog, dusty and thin, trotted inside. Its ribs were visible, yet it moved with surprising confidence. Stopping in the center of the room, the dog looked around as if evaluating the faces before it. Judge Campbell paused mid-sentence, eyes narrowing. Just as the bailiff stepped forward to remove the dog, it barked, sharp and commanding. Heads turned. The dog barked again, louder this time, fixing its gaze intently on Hollis. A ripple of unease swept the room. Then, after a third bark, the dog sat down, its tail wagging faintly as if signaling that its task was complete. Hollis shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting nervously between the dog and the judge. Before anyone could react, the bailiff pointed to the dog's collar, where a tiny rusted key dangled, glinting under the courtroom lights. The room fell silent. Judge Campbell, momentarily at a loss, instructed the bailiff to secure the dog. The bailiff cautiously approached, unhooked the key, and held it up. "Your Honor, this key was attached to the dog's collar," he announced, disbelief evident in his tone. Judge Campbell's eyes narrowed. "A key? What does it unlock?" she asked. Before anyone could answer, the dog stood, trotted deliberately toward Hollis's table, and sat directly in front of him, growling softly. Hollis recoiled, his face pale. His lawyer leaped to his feet. "This is absurd. Remove that animal immediately," he demanded. Prosecutor Elaine Morgan, known for her sharp instincts, rose calmly. "Your Honor, may I inspect the key?" "It could be relevant to the case," she requested. Judge Campbell hesitated, then nodded. Morgan examined the key closely, recognizing an emblem from a private storage facility linked to Hollis. "Your Honor," Morgan announced, holding the key aloft. "This emblem matches that of a storage facility associated with the defendant. We suspect it holds critical evidence." Hollis's lawyer objected furiously, but Judge Campbell silenced him. "Motion granted," she declared. "Bailiff, accompany the prosecutor to execute the search warrant immediately." At the storage facility, Morgan's hands trembled slightly as she inserted the key into a storage unit's lock. It clicked open, revealing rows of file boxes. Inside were ledgers, contracts, and receipts, proof of a complex web of fraud and embezzlement. Back in the courtroom, chaos reigned as news of the discovery spread. Reporters scrambled to update their stories, and Judge Campbell listened intently as Morgan presented the evidence. "Your Honor," Morgan declared, her voice steady, "these documents prove that Mr. Hollis diverted funds meant for charities into offshore accounts." This key, she emphasized, was the missing link. Hollis's lawyer attempted to object, but Judge Campbell dismissed him curtly. "If your client has nothing to hide, then he has nothing to fear," she said sharply. As the session adjourned, the stray dog, temporarily placed in a local animal shelter, rested peacefully, oblivious to the chaos it had unleashed. The staff, touched by the dog's unexpected heroism, decided to name him Justice. For Judge Campbell, the mystery was far from over. How had this stray come to possess the key? And why had it singled out Hollis so deliberately? As she watched, the courtroom empty, she couldn't shake the feeling that this case was only just beginning. Led by an unlikely witness who had already proven that the truth finds a way, no matter how improbable the messenger. Reporters hurried to file their stories, while spectators whispered in disbelief. Amidst the chaos, the prosecution exchanged subtle nods of satisfaction. Yet one question lingered in everyone's mind. How did the dog know to intervene? Outside the courthouse, Prosecutor Elaine Morgan paused to catch her breath. She glanced at the overcast sky, the weight of the day settling heavily on her shoulders. As she walked to her car, her thoughts remained fixed on justice, the stray dog who had turned the entire case upside down. Sometimes, she murmured to herself, the universe works in mysterious ways. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Morgan, now armed with crucial evidence, felt confident. Yet the mystery of the stray dog continued to haunt her. How did the animal find the key, and why had it appeared at such a crucial moment? These questions echoed in her mind as the court was adjourned for the day. Later that evening, as Morgan returned to her office, her phone rang. It was a call from the local animal shelter. The staff member on the line sounded eager. "Miss Morgan, you need to see this. It's about Justice, the dog. There's something important you should know." Intrigued, Morgan drove to the shelter. When she arrived, Justice greeted her with a wagging tail and alert eyes. Carla, a young woman who worked at the shelter, handed Morgan a faded tag. "We didn't notice this before," Carla explained. Justice had it hidden under his collar, along with the key. "It looks like a name tag." Morgan examined the worn engraving, Max, and an address on the edge of town. Her curiosity sparked. She decided to visit the address the next morning at Asaik. Dawn, Morgan arrived at a rundown farmhouse surrounded by wild grass. An elderly man answered her knock, his eyes lighting up when he saw the tag. "Max!" he gasped, tears welling up. "You found my Max!" Morgan explained how Max had disrupted a high-profile trial with a key linked to the defendant, David Hollis. The man introduced himself as Henry, a retired locksmith who had lived alone for years. He recounted how Max, his loyal German shepherd, had gone missing months ago during a storm. "He's not just a dog," Henry said, his voice shaking. "He's family." When Morgan showed Henry the key, his expression shifted from joy to confusion. "That's one of my old keys," he said slowly. "I made it for David Hollis years ago. He paid me extra to keep it quiet, said it was for a private storage unit." Morgan's mind raced. The connection between Henry, Hollis, and the key was too significant to dismiss. "Henry," Morgan said firmly, "you might have just uncovered the missing link in our case. I need you to come to the courthouse and give a statement." Back in the courtroom, anticipation was thick in the air. Hollis, visibly anxious, fidgeted in his seat. Morgan introduced Henry as a witness, revealing the link between Hollis and the mysterious key. "Your Honor," Morgan addressed Judge Campbell, "this key, brought to us by Justice, leads directly to a storage unit owned by the defendant." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Hollis's lawyer objected immediately, but Judge Campbell silenced him with a firm hand. "Let the witness speak," she ordered. Henry recounted his story with surprising clarity, detailing how Hollis had hired him under suspicious circumstances. As Morgan presented documents recovered from the storage unit, proof of embezzlement, and fraud, the jury's expressions shifted from uncertainty to conviction. Hollis's lawyer tried desperately to challenge the evidence, but the damage was already done. The jury exchanged knowing glances, and Hollis sank lower in his seat, his confidence shattered. As the court adjourned for the day, Morgan felt a surge of triumph. Justice, the stray dog, had proven to be an unlikely hero. Yet, one mystery remained. How had Max ended up with the key in the first place? That evening, Morgan returned to the animal shelter. Justice greeted her warmly, his eyes bright and attentive. As she scratched behind his ears, she couldn't help but smile. "You're more than just a dog, aren't you?" she whispered. Justice wagged his tail, his eyes meeting hers as if to say, "You'll see." The trial resumed the next morning with an air of expectation. The jury was visibly moved by the story of justice, while Hollis's defense team scrambled, desperately. Judge Campbell, usually composed, couldn't hide a faint smile as the stray dog, now known as Justice, sat proudly in the back of the courtroom beside Henry. As the trial neared its end, Morgan addressed the jury directly. "Sometimes the most unlikely heroes bring the truth to light," she said, gesturing toward Justice. In this case, that hero just happened to have 4 paws. The jury's expressions softened, and even Judge Campbell seemed touched. Meanwhile, Hollis leaned towards his lawyer, his voice frantic. "We need to do something," he hissed. "There's nothing we can do," his lawyer replied grimly. "The evidence is airtight." Hollis's face reddened with fury, but it was too late. The truth was out, and Justice, the stray who had wandered into the courtroom, had proven that sometimes fate has a way of revealing what people try so desperately to hide. The courtroom buzzed with tension as reporters scrambled to file updates and spectators exchanged anxious whispers. Amidst the chaos, prosecutor Elaine Morgan felt a chill run down her spine. The trial was already a whirlwind of shocking twists, but nothing could have prepared her for the revelation that had just landed in her inbox. The email was brief, but staggering. Justice was no stray. He was trained by Hollis years ago for private security on his estate. Investigate further. You'll find more than you expect. The sender's ID was hidden behind the initials AED Anonymous, but the claim left Morgan reeling. Could it really be true? Could Justice, the stray German shepherd who had turned the trial on its head, once have belonged to the very man he helped expose? If so, it raised a troubling question. Were Justice's actions truly instinctual, or was there a deeper story yet to be uncovered? Determined to uncover the truth, Morgan decided to visit Henry Dawson, the retired locksmith who had taken Justice in before the trial began. The next morning, she pulled up to Henry's modest farmhouse, where Justice greeted her with a wagging tail and bright eyes. Henry welcomed her inside, offering a cup of tea as they settled at the kitchen table. "I received some information suggesting that Justice might have been connected to David Hollis before this case," Morgan began cautiously. "Do you know anything about that?" Henry's brow furrowed, his face shadowed with concern. "It's possible," he admitted slowly. "When I first found Max, Justice, he was wandering near the edge of town. He looked well-fed, like someone had been taking care of him. But there was no collar, no ID, other than the tag with my address. I always thought it was odd that a dog like him would be abandoned." Morgan's mind raced. "And you didn't recognize the key on his collar?" Henry shook his head, looking puzzled. "I didn't think much of it at the time. Figured it was from one of the random jobs I'd done years ago. But now that I think about it, I did some work for Hollis in the past. He had a security team, dogs included. The pieces were beginning to fall into place. If Justice had indeed been one of Hollis's trained security dogs, then his presence in the courtroom was no coincidence. It was fate." Meanwhile, back at the courthouse, David Hollis was growing increasingly desperate. During a recess, he pulled his lawyer, Carter, aside, his eyes flashing with frustration. "We need to control this story," Hollis snapped. "If they dig too deep into Justice's past, they'll uncover things I can't afford to have exposed." Carter, visibly frustrated, ran a hand through his hair. "There's nothing we can do, David. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and the jury is already swayed by the dog's actions. Unless you have a miracle hidden somewhere, we're out of options." Hollis's eyes darkened, a dangerous glint reflecting off them. "If they're going to dig into Justice's past," he growled, "maybe we should give them something else to focus on." The following day, a shocking twist disrupted the trial. A video surfaced online, allegedly showing Justice in an altercation with a man at a construction site. Though grainy, the footage was clear enough to identify the dog, appearing to depict him lunging aggressively at the man, who was later revealed to be one of Hollis's former employees. The defense wasted no time presenting the video in court. Carter's voice rang out confidently. "Your Honor, this video raises serious questions about the credibility of this dog's behavior. It challenges the notion of justice being the so-called hero of this case." The jury exchanged uneasy glances, and even Judge Campbell seemed momentarily taken aback. But Morgan remained composed. She requested a brief recess to investigate the video's authenticity. Within hours, Morgan's team uncovered the truth. The video had been heavily edited to paint justice in a negative light. The original footage, retrieved from a security camera, revealed the full story. Justice had been defending a young child who had wandered into the construction site, positioning himself between the child and a falling beam. Morgan wasted no time presenting her findings. "Your Honor," she declared, her voice firm, "the defense has presented a misleading video to defame Justice's character. The unedited footage clearly shows Justice acting to protect a child, not as an aggressor." Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the jury watched the unedited video. Their expressions shifted from doubt to admiration. Hollis's attempt to discredit the dog had backfired spectacularly. As the trial resumed, the tension was palpable. The defense, now desperate, introduced a new twist. Carter approached the bench with a grim expression and a folder in hand. "Your Honor," he began, addressing Judge Campbell, "the defense has obtained new evidence. It directly challenges the prosecution's reliance on the dog, Justice." Morgan's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What evidence?" she demanded. Carter unfolded the documents with deliberate slowness. "These records indicate that Justice, real name Max, was part of a specialized K-9 training program for private security. He was trained specifically to retrieve objects and follow complex commands. His actions during this case may not have been instinctual, but rather the result of prior training under Hollis's estate." A murmur spread through the courtroom. The jury's eyes darted back and forth, curiosity piqued by this new revelation. Morgan, however, refused to be rattled. She requested a recess to examine the documents. During the break, Morgan met with Henry once more. "Henry," she pressed, "is it possible Justice could have been one of Hollis's trained dogs?" Henry rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I suppose it's possible," he admitted. "He was well trained when I found him. Too well trained for a stray. And I did some work for Hollis years back. He had a whole team of security dogs, all highly trained." Morgan's suspicions hardened into certainty. If Justice had indeed been one of Hollis's dogs, then his loyalty was never to his old master's crimes, but to the pursuit of justice itself. Returning to the courtroom, Morgan called Dr. Sarah Bennett, an animal behaviorist, to the stand. "Dr. Bennett," Morgan began, "can you explain Justice's actions given this new information?" Dr. Bennett smiled warmly. "Dogs are incredibly perceptive," she explained. "Even if Justice was once trained by Hollis, his actions during this case suggest loyalty to the truth rather than to any previous master. His willingness to expose evidence speaks to a remarkable sense of right and wrong." The jury seemed moved by Dr. Bennett's testimony. Hollis, meanwhile, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze fixed on the ground. By the end of the day, Morgan felt a surge of confidence. Despite the defense's efforts to twist the narrative, the truth had emerged stronger than ever. Justice, the stray dog who wasn't a stray at all, had proven that some bonds go beyond training and ownership. In the quiet moments after court adjourned, Morgan knelt to scratch Justice behind the ears. "Looks like you've been living. Up to your name," she whispered with a smile. Justice wagged his tail, his eyes steady and true. Morgan scanned the documents alongside her team, noting that the files appeared authentic. They detailed Justice's enrollment at a private K-9 training center and his subsequent assignment to a security firm owned by David Hollis. The discovery was alarming, but not entirely surprising. Morgan turned to her assistant, Ava. a young paralegal who had been invaluable in gathering evidence. "We need to verify these records and figure out why Hollis's team waited until now to reveal them," Morgan instructed. Ava nodded, her fingers already flying over her laptop. "I'm on it. If these documents are legit, there's got to be more to uncover." In the courtroom, the jury's view of justice began to waver. The defense's new evidence introduced doubts, suggesting that the dog's actions might have been a result of previous training rather than instinct. Sensing an opportunity, Carter, the defense attorney, called a former K-9 trainer to the stand. Martin Hayes, a stern-looking man, spoke confidently. "Yes, I remember Max," he said, referring to Justice. "One of the best we trained, sharp, obedient, and fiercely loyal." Carter's tone was steady. "Mr. Hayes, could you explain the type of training Max received?" "Certainly," Hayes replied. "He was trained for retrieval, tracking, and object recognition. If given a command, he would follow it without question." Carter turned to the jury with a slight smile. "So, it's reasonable to say that Max's ability to retrieve the key was due to his training, not some miraculous instinct." Hayes hesitated, glancing at Justice, who lay calmly by Henry Dawson's side. "I suppose that's possible," he conceded, though his voice wavered. When Morgan rose to cross-examine, her approach was pointed. "Mr. Hayes," she began, "you mentioned that Justice, Max, was trained at your facility. Can you confirm if he was still in your care or working for Hollis at the time of the incident?" Hayes shifted uneasily. "No, he wasn't. He had been missing for years. We assumed he was either stolen or abandoned." Morgan's eyes narrowed slightly. "So, you can't say for certain that his actions in this case were influenced by your training?" After a moment's pause, Hayes admitted, "No, I can't." Morgan turned to the jury, her tone firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a dog who, despite being abandoned and left to fend for himself, showed exceptional intelligence and loyalty. His training might be a part of his past, but his actions in this case were entirely his own, a testament to his remarkable nature and the bond between humans and animals." Outside the courtroom, Ava returned with new evidence that took the case in a different direction. She had uncovered a series of emails between Hollis and the K-9 facility, revealing that Hollis had deliberately abandoned Justice after a failed mission, deeming him useless. The emails painted a grim picture of Hollis's treatment of the animals in his care. Morgan wasted no time presenting them. "Your Honor," she addressed Judge Campbell, "these emails clearly show that the defendant not only abandoned Justice but also displayed a pattern of cruelty and neglect towards the animals he employed. Justice's involvement in this case is no coincidence, it's poetic justice." The jury's expressions hardened, their initial doubts replaced by a growing sense of conviction. The revelations about Hollis were not only criminal, but deeply unethical. Justice's role in the case now carried even greater significance. As the day ended, Morgan took a moment to reflect. The defense's efforts to discredit Justice had backfired, exposing even more of Hollis's dark secrets. Justice, sensing the shift in mood, rested his head on Henry's knee, his eyes calm and trusting. Morgan couldn't help but smile. The trial was far from over, but with each new revelation, the truth felt closer, and Justice's role as an unlikely hero became even more apparent. The courtroom had become a battleground of truth and deception, with each new piece of evidence peeling back another layer of Hollis's crimes. The case was no longer just about theft. It had transformed into a powerful story of loyalty, redemption, and the most unexpected heroes. The desire for redemption, for the suffering he had faced, drove Morgan, and in doing so, he unveiled the truth about David Hollis. Although Hollis's lawyer objected, the damage had been done. The expressions on the jurors' faces revealed that Morgan's words had struck a nerve. The emotional weight of the case was unmistakable, and the pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the trial approached its climax. Both sides had presented their arguments, and the jury was on the edge of their seats, eager to see how everything would unfold. For Morgan, this moment was about more than just evidence. It was about telling a story so compelling that the jury couldn't look away. A story that demanded justice not just for Henry and his farm, but for Justice, the dog, as well. The following day, David Hollis took the stand, a risky move by the defense, but with limited options, they had little choice. Carter hoped Hollis could sway the jury by portraying himself as a misunderstood businessman who had been wrongly accused. However, Morgan saw this as an opportunity to dismantle Hollis's narrative bit by bit. Hollis sat with a guarded confidence as Carter began his questioning, attempting to paint Hollis as a hard-working man who had been unfairly targeted. "Mr. Hollis, can you tell us about your business and how you've contributed to the community?" Carter asked. Hollis's voice was steady as he responded, "I've run a successful logistics company for over a decade. We've provided jobs, supported local charities, and helped many businesses thrive." Carter smiled, directing his gaze at the jury as if to say, "See, he's just an ordinary guy." But Morgan was ready. When it was her turn, her tone was calm, yet piercing. "Mr. Hollis, you've portrayed yourself as a community leader. Can you explain why multiple witnesses have testified to your involvement in illegal activities?" Hollis's confidence wavered. "Those are unfounded accusations," he replied, his voice less certain. Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Unfounded. Clara Evans testified under oath about your involvement. Are you saying she lied?" Hollis hesitated. "She's mistaken," he muttered. Morgan leaned in, her voice cutting through the silence. "Mistaken about the forged documents? The stolen goods? The trained dogs you discarded when they were no longer useful?" The courtroom was silent, every eye fixed on Hollis as he shifted, uncomfortably without a response. She pressed on. "Let's talk about Justice. Witnesses have confirmed he was trained under your supervision. Can you deny that?" Hollis's jaw tightened. "I didn't personally train him," he deflected. "But you knew about it," Morgan countered swiftly. "And when he didn't meet your expectations, you abandoned him. Isn't that true?" Hollis attempted to dismiss it. "That's not relevant to this case," he snapped. Morgan's voice rose, passion evident. "It's entirely relevant. Justice's actions led to the discovery of the key, the stolen goods, and ultimately your criminal activities. He's not just a dog in this case, Mr. Hollis. He's a victim and a hero." Hollis stepped down from the stand, visibly rattled. Morgan, turning to the jury for her closing arguments, recounted Justice's journey, from an abandoned dog to a hero who uncovered the truth. Her words painted a picture of loyalty, resilience, and the pursuit of justice. Carter's closing arguments, by contrast, lacked conviction. He tried to cast doubt on the prosecution's evidence, suggesting it was merely circumstantial. But the jury seemed unconvinced, their attention drifting. After deliberation, the jury returned with the verdict. The foreperson's voice was clear and unwavering. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." A wave of relief swept through the courtroom. Henry embraced justice, tears streaming down his face, while Morgan allowed herself a moment to breathe, the weight of the trial finally lifting. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Morgan, addressing the crowd, spoke with resolve. This case was about more than theft. It was about loyalty, courage, and the bond between humans and animals. Justice reminded us of what truly matters. Henry's words were simpler, but no less heartfelt. "Justice saved my life in more ways than one. I'll never forget what he's done for me and this community." The crowd's applause was thunderous as Justice, unfazed by the attention, wagged his tail. In the weeks that followed, Justice became a local legend. Schools invited Henry to share his story. and Justice's presence captivated children and adults alike. Inspired by the case, Morgan launched a community initiative called Justice's Legacy, aimed at helping abandoned animals. With Justice as its symbol, the program quickly gained support. Though fame had found them, life on the farm settled into a peaceful routine. Justice, ever loyal, followed Henry around the fields, content in his role as protector and friend. Evenings were spent on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. One such evening, as the sky blazed in hues of orange and pink, Henry looked down at Justice, his voice soft. "You did more than I could have ever asked for, buddy. You've given me hope again." Justice leaned into Henry's touch, his tail wagging gently, a silent promise that he would always be by his side. As the years passed, the bond between Henry and Justice remained unbreakable. The farm thrived, Justice's legacy expanded, and their story became woven into the fabric of the community. For Henry, life was no longer just about survival. It was about gratitude, love, and the simple joy of sharing each day with his loyal companion. In the stillness of one quiet evening, Henry whispered, "Thank you, Justice, for everything." Justice's eyes met Henry's, and in that shared gaze was a lifetime of love and understanding, a reminder of the extraordinary bond between a man and his dog. If this story moved, you don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. And remember, every act of kindness, no matter how small, can make a world of difference. See you in the next story.